And welcome to the VSA Capital Tech and Transitional Energy podcast on Thursday, the 11th of September. Phil's still away on holiday. I think he's out in Scotland, probably having terrible weather, actually, but what a shame. So we've got David again. David, how are you?
So you are a little bit faint, but I can still hear you. Yeah, it's great to be on the call. And if I may, I'd like to kick off a little bit in the US and then move on to the UK. Is that okay to get started?
Yeah, you kick off, David. I'm more than happy with that.
Okay, so just to highlight that in the US, the CPI core came in as expected. I think the markets took that as a read that the Fed's on track to cut rates, and we've had a very strong opening in the US. But in tech land specifically, the cybersecurity industry in the US is estimated to be 270 billion and growing at 12% per annum. US CIO survey data shows firms intend to spend 50% more on cybersecurity products than general software products, with the trend in platformization for cybersecurity products, with firms looking to integrate and simplify their cyber defense structures. Brokers are highlighting Palo Alto, CrowdStrike, and Zscaler as beneficiaries. These companies offer solutions across the security chain, that's in devices, cloud, applications, and networks. Now, after hours on Tuesday, Oracle leapt 30%. The company delivered a mixed earnings report, but revealed a significant increase in its backlog of contracted work. This backlog rose to 455 billion from 138 billion in Q4. This figure is indicative of the intense demand for renting AI servers in the cloud, a business that the firm has only recently entered after years in the database market. The cloud business unit is expected to deliver 18 billion in revenues in the fiscal year and grow to 144 billion in annual revenues by May 2030. But let's put that into perspective. Oracle's May 25 revenues were 57 billion. So really exciting stuff for Oracle, and justified an upward move in the share price and caught the street very much by surprise. Now, sticking to AI, driven by the rise of AI, growing demands on data centers and large-scale industrial and domestic electrification, global electricity demand is growing at a rapid and accelerating rate, with a forecast of 4% growth in 2027 and beyond. Now, looking regionally, 60% of the world's increase in electricity consumption over 2025 and 2026 is expected to be driven by regionally China and India. Now, this brings us to our corporate client, Invinity Energy Systems, the leading global vanadium flow battery manufacturer of utility-grade storage. Now, on Tuesday, Invinity Energy Systems announced a 25 million investment and new strategic partner. The company has entered into conditional subscription agreements to receive an investment of a total of 25 million from two new investors, being Atri Energy Transition and Next Gen Mobility. The price was set at 19.5 pence, and there will be a general meeting on the 30th of September. Now, the circular was posted today. So, Andrew, you're very familiar with this, and could you kindly tell us a bit about Atri, Next Gen, their background, their aims through this investment, and perhaps the relationship agreement they have?
Well, I'm glad you're going to give me a bit of a go, David. I thought for a minute you were going to do the entire podcast. And also, I think you were reading some of that off a piece of paper, weren't you?
Oh, you are correct.
Anyway, as David says, that is quite a good segue into what's been going on in Invinity. Now, look, I know on Invinity, we're obviously very close to the company. I know a lot of people have found this a company where you have to be incredibly patient, and some people perhaps haven't got that patience. And it's also a company where one or two people like to try and stir up trouble. Most of the time they get the facts completely wrong, actually, or they'll get 10% of the facts right, but the rest of it is wrong. I know I've listened to some negative opinions recently, and some of the facts were wrong. I mean, things like, the placing price is just completely the wrong price. So be very careful when listening to people about this. But yes, look, it has been hard work, Invinity. I can't deny it. But these are two quite important announcements, as you say. The first one came out actually with an MOU to expand their capabilities in China, in Xiamen province in particular. Quite a difficult one to pronounce that, but Xiamen. It's actually just off on the Chinese coastline opposite Taiwan, actually, but that's just putting it into where it is, not a comment on Taiwan. Look, I think, a lot of people would say, well, an MOU with China, what's all that about? What really comes out of that? Actually, there is something really quite important about this. First of all, China actually in the last few years has gone vanadium flow battery bananas. They are building them left, right, and centre. They have become the number one player pretty much in the world for building vanadium flow batteries. And so what this does is it gives them a Chinese partner. And maybe one of the keys here is, obviously they're hoping to license their technology because they have a very specific technology to the Chinese, and hopefully get some sort of royalty out of it, because they do the license and royalty model. But actually, this company will be able to help them manufacture vanadium flow batteries and significantly reduce the price. Because one of the problems with the vanadium flow battery, although if you look at the L cost, which is the levelized cost of the product over its entire life, it looks attractive against lithium. The upfront cost is too high. So actually, although many people looked at this and went, it's China, is this important? This actually is important. They also, this particular company, has access to vanadium itself in South Africa. And so it'll help them, again, get very or better priced vanadium electrolyte for all of their products. So it's actually quite an important announcement. Yes, it doesn't bring revenue on day one, which of course is what a lot of people are looking for, but it's an important fit and part of the company's growth. Then the next one, as you say, was an Indian investment by two parties, Atri and NextGen, a £25 million investment. Actually, at VSA Capital, we helped do this. And again, what is key about this one is that the Atri are keen to help build out a vanadium flow battery business across India, which so far really hasn't started at all. But Atri believe that there's a potentially a very big marketplace there, and that could be, again, very exciting longer term for Invinity. NextGen Mobility is actually it's a Guernsey-based fund that we know, and we did another transaction, as I think most people know, a couple of weeks ago for Aurrigo, where we raised them £14 million, and NextGen were involved in that one. They're looking at a lot of energy transition type deals. They do know each other. They're not connected. They act completely independently. But again, I think this is a deal where Atri, if they take the product to India, it's a license and royalty deal. And so, again, it can bring in revenue without actually having to have any capex, which is actually, pretty exciting. Both deals are actually really quite key. And of course, getting another 25 million into the balance sheet does remove that concern that a lot of investors were having, which was, look, you raised £57 million at 23p back in March 2024. Is all that money starting to run out? Are you going to need another fundraising? This tells you no. This gives them another boost to their bank balance, shall we say. And so they've got plenty of runway to do what we really need, and that is to actually, there's a couple of things that we're really, I think, waiting for now. We need physical orders to come for what is now basically their Endurium VFB, the latest product. I am very hopeful. I don't know anything, but, if you read their last statement, they were very clear about the fact that they have got a whole load of things in the pipeline. Now, there's in the pipeline and there's closing out a deal, but I think it is vanadium flow batteries becoming more and more important. And as you say, these data centers and AI are taking up so much more power there's got to be a solution to it. So I think, if we start to see some orders coming through now in the next month, 2 months before the end of the year, the stock really could have a very good run. Now, the other thing, of course, is that, there's two other things I want to mention, actually. One is, don't forget that it was Siemens Gamesa Renewable Energy were testing an Endurium battery with the view of actually putting it for themselves to sell through the Siemens network. Obviously, that business was bought by ABB the other day, and so we're still waiting, unfortunately, for that takeover to sort of really completely complete before we can get some good news out on their testing of the Endurium battery. But there's no bad news, which tends to suggest that once that deal has gone through, hopefully we'll get some very, very good news, and that could send the stock clearly, somewhat ballistic, I think. That's me being very bullish. And then, of course, we all know that there's the Lodes projects, and that and the whole cap and floor bid process for their batteries, where we know a lot of bids went in. They've already announced that, and we're sitting waiting to see what's actually accepted. Clearly, it won't all be accepted, and it could be theoretically zero. But even 5% will be a huge boost for them in the future. So what I'm really trying to get to, there's a lot of actually news sort of sitting, waiting to come out, which I know it's patience again, but it won't take much to really get it motoring. Now, I am expecting their interims towards the end of September, so we probably only got a couple of weeks or so to wait for the interims. Actually, in the last RNS, a lot of their financial performance and news was out there. So the interims itself perhaps won't tell us anything dramatically exciting or new. But then, obviously, once you got that out of the way, the company is able to talk more openly and will be talking to investors, probably doing a bit more marketing. And so that everyone will be able to get a much better update after that. So sorry, David, I've given a long spiel, a bit like the way you did at the start there. But I think it's quite important. We are very close to this company. We've really, hung our hat on it, so to speak. There are a lot of things going on. I think in a podcast probably about 6 months ago, I said, look, this company is either worth nothing because it doesn't work, or it's worth at least £1. The fact of the matter is that what we've seen over the last 3 months with various bits of news coming out, that dial, which you didn't know quite which direction it's going to go, has moved away from the nothing completely. And actually, it's now pointing pretty firmly at £1, in my view. Obviously, I'm bullish. But I think that sums up most of the news, unless you've got other thoughts on that, David.
Well, you'll be able to correct me, but I was just thinking about the Actuary Next Gen relationship agreement, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, they can appoint a director to the board, but the shareholding has to be 10% plus. Plus, they'll establish a technology committee and have some influence in appointing senior managers in positions in the Indian operations. And NextGen, likewise, if they get over 10% or so, they can have an observer. So it looks like they can grow their interest and impact and bring their expertise to the company in these markets.
Yes, you've got it absolutely correct there, David. And they're two completely separate and different relationship agreements. But yes, they are going to have positions on the board. As you say, one is a director, one is an observer. That's actually quite normal. I mean, for those that can remember back at WeWay, when Bushveld took a stake in, actually it was sort of Red Tea at the time, and we were transforming it into Invinity. They had a director on the board, which is Raj, and Raj is actually still there, even though Bushveld are no longer there. So it's a totally standard sort of thing to have. But yes, it's good that they have that level of interest. This is something that the world is waking up to. That vanadium flow batteries are definitely part of the long duration energy storage mix.
Indeed, and other major investors, if you will. Can you also comment about Arthur Global?
Yeah, look, they're an Indian fund management group. They do have a relationship with NextGen, actually, and they obviously, we're looking at. I mean, I think it's fair to say that the Indian community is starting to look at the whole long duration energy storage space. And what is coming up is, look, actually, India needs vanadium flow batteries, and so just as often you get a whole bunch of different institutions in London, maybe all going into the same stock because word's got out this is a good stock and the brokers are broking it correctly and getting the story out there. I think it's fair to say that probably in India the story is out there that if you want to get exposure to vanadium flow batteries, the way to do it is through Invinity Energy Systems.
Indeed. I think that sort of covers my sense and excitement in this announcement. And you were closer than I, but also we did send out a brief little note as well today, and our analyst Phil will, as we mentioned earlier, will be back, so we can probably expect some more in the not too distant future.
Yeah, look, I think probably after the interims, which I say will be at the end of the month, I'm sure there'll be quite a lot of chitter chatter, shall we say. It's a lot easier once you've got your interims out. You can talk much more openly.
Indeed.
Very good. Actually, although it's we've only really discussed one stock, shall we, David? I think that's pretty enough today, isn't it?
Yeah, I did have a scan through, and I couldn't. Nothing leapt out at me that to me to have a chat about.
Yeah, and it's amazing. I've done an entire podcast without going into politics. Very good. I'll be back with Phil next week.
Many thanks.
This podcast has been produced and edited by VSA Capital. It is intended for information purposes and not as investment advice. The information is intended for recipients who understand the risks associated with equity investments in smaller companies. Please do your own research and do not rely on a single source when making an investment decision. VSA Capital may derive fees from this content and seeks to do business with the companies mentioned.